Hello gamers. Despite having all my chips on Nothing Ever Happens, it is becoming increasingly clear that we are approaching the end of the world. Fortunately, the post-apocalypse makes for great video games. It's a very popular setting, though less popular is the post-post-apocalypse, where the apocalypse happened a while back and civilization is on the mend. Even less popular is the post-post-post-apocalypse. This is where many generations have passed since the end of the world, and we've completely forgotten it ever happened. This describes the world of Project Wingman. The penultimate entry in the California Suck series, and middle entry in the US Revolution trilogy. While in our world we will likely be cleansed in atomic fire, in the world of Project Wingman, every volcano in the Pacific Ring of Fire touched off at once. Set 432 years after Calamity, the world has changed both in demographics and its physical appearance. Hawaii has gotten swole, Japan is gone, and to everyone's delight, California has detached itself from the rest of North America. The Taiwanese and Ukrainians rule the world order, and most warfare is outsourced to PMCs. Following a great Australian incident, the joint Zelensky-Tencent regime named the Pacific Federation is the strongest in the world.
我在北京
The nation of Cascadia has declared independence, refusing to fund the war machine of the Federation. What the Cascadians lack in military forces and reasonable doctrines, they make up for in raw capital. They have used this to hire every mercenary under the sun to fight for their cause. We play as Monarch, flight lead of Hitman team of the Sicario Mercenary Corps. These are not to be confused with that film from 2015.
What the fuck are we doing?
As a proud MAGA patriot and fighter pilot, it's up to us and our wacky cast of allies to free this land by mass property damage. As a brief aside, Project Wingman is heavily inspired by the Ace Combat series. It was made by Ace Combat fans and has numerous references to it. It may seem unfair to compare a well-established series with a large budget to a game made by a small team with a small budget, but I will do so, largely in praise of the smaller title. With that said, what's the game like? It's a pretty nice looking game. The majority of detail went into the aircraft models and it clearly shows. You can look from a cockpit POV and see all the details inside, plus you get a functioning radar. Unlike Project Aces, who have the entire military industrial complex on speed dial, Sector D2 and its whopping 3 developers can't license any aircraft. That isn't an Su-27, that's an Sk-27. That isn't a B-52, that's an IA-52. That isn't an F-22. No, it really isn't, look at those canards. There are some minor visual bugs and oversights. For example, if you destroy a vehicle, it visually appears undamaged and keeps moving. Not an issue for 90% of the game, but it is occasionally noticeable. The game does get a lot of visual effects right. Missile trails and explosions look great, which is necessary for a game that centres around firing missiles and blowing things up. People talk heavily on how orange the game is, and that's definitely true in its last third for plot reasons. There is still tons of variety in environments, like fighting under a thunderstorm and occasionally breaking through to the blue sky. Audio is good, from the impacts of bombs to the sound of cash being deposited in your vast offshore account. Plus it's always nice to hear sonic booms and heli rotors as you fly by. The bigger weapons are also done justice by their sound effects. As for the voice acting, it's generally pretty good. You might think the VAs were recording on an Xbox mic in a cupboard, but that's just the excessive radio filter. I genuinely thought some of the characters were different people, comparing how they sound in mission versus in briefings. For example,
Careful's my last name and safety's my mom. Let's go, Monarch. I'd like to touch down before lunch.
I'm over here stroking my dick.
there is actually a wide variety of accents to the different characters, compared to Ace Combat's American focus. One issue I do have with dialogue is subtitles. There's occasional typos which aren't a big deal, but sometimes entire lines are different. The game's single cutscene is a static background with just dialogue, which would be fine if there was any indicator of who's actually talking. Another problem is how the dialogue is set out in missions. In Mission 19 there's about 5.5 minutes of relevant dialogue during the first section. Yet it takes about 1.5 minutes to beat this first segment, so if you play at normal pace you'll miss a lot of content. Okay, what about the gameplay though? You may believe by the fact it's a flight game that you'll need an entire replica cockpit and 2 years of training to play. Luckily, it's an arcade flight game. Aircraft aren't limited by G-forces and neither are you. You can pack a cruiser's worth of armaments under your wing, and you tend to fight enemies well within visual range. Between missions we get the chance to purchase aircraft, which is as far as progression goes. There's no AC-7 style upgrade system. We do get a VTOL jet though, so that's cool. There isn't a huge amount to talk about when it comes to the gameplay. It's a dedicated PC title, so unlike AC7, we're able to rebind keys and get a lot of customization over the controls. The default ones aren't great, so I'd recommend you mess around a bit in level 1. There's War Thunder style mouse aim as an option, which functions fine but makes the better aircraft wobbly when they overcorrect. Cockpit view is pretty much unusable with it as well. At a tactical level, the gameplay is pretty good. The briefing tells you the mission details and the distribution of enemy types, so you can plan your loadout accordingly. Each aircraft can pack between 1 and 3 special weapons, alongside their gun and standard missiles. You might want to use a slot to get more standard missiles, or more of the same weapons at once. Heavy targets like ships and airships, yes they are a thing, have hard points you need to destroy before bringing the main structure down. Yet specialist anti-ship missiles can punch right through. Gun pods are overpowered, especially when stacked on multiple pylons. Enemy variety is good, from the aforementioned airships to Zumwalt style warships and ground-based railguns. You do get a sense of being in actual dogfights with enemies, rather than just mowing through hordes of jets. This is especially true on the hardest post-game difficulty, but we'll get to that. So while the moment-to-moment stuff is great, I do have some issues with mission structure. Every mission is a simple, destroy all primary targets to progress type deal. There's no time limit either, so there's a lack of tension much of the time, i.e. in a mission to protect surrounded ground forces, how much damage they take is irrelevant. You can take your sweet time providing that Whiskey Delta ground support, in stark contrast to Ace Combat 7's desperate defense at Stonehenge. I get why they did this. Time missions are a huge complaint made about Ace Combat, and I'm sure many were happy with this change. However, there's literally no mission variety, with one exception. Ace Combat's gimmick missions sucked at times, but at least they broke up the pace of the game and were occasionally really good. PW does have one mission like this, Clear Skies. It's really good. Objective is to down enemy transports while simultaneously avoiding destroying civilian air traffic. If you do bring down a civ jet, it's probably because you were using a multi-lock, giving you a few seconds to realise your mistake. If you don't end up recreating Korean Airlines Flight 007, then you get to hear dialogue that shows you the perspective of those on board the civilian aircraft.
Well, congratulations! You got yourself caught! Sir? Now what's the next step of your master plan?
Crashing this plane. With no survivors!
Civilian plane shot down. Mission failure. Was that my fault?
Tell me about Bane! Why does he wear the mask?
Technically there's 2 more examples of this mission type. At the end of Eminent Domain, you have to intercept cruise missiles. However, they have to be slower than the game's slowest jet. Yeah, not tense in the slightest. The other example is hidden in spoiler territory. To praise the mission structure though, the game has excellent pacing throughout the campaign. What the game lacks in mission variety, it makes up for in enemy composition variety. Some missions have borderlines we're advised not to cross due to heavy enemy presence on the other side. But since we get paid by target, the payment system for targets gets you to act like a mercenary. You want to destroy as much as possible and get frustrated at kill steals. Each mission has its own distinct rhythm of gameplay, largely thanks to the music. The music in this game probably deserves its own segment, so Music is Project Wingman's biggest strength, to the point it beats out much larger studios when it comes to its quality. Naturally, music plays almost continuously from launching the game to seeing the credits roll. Menus, like the aircraft hangar, are given a much greater sense of mood with the music accompanying it. The same goes for missions. Let's play a game. Project Wingman has 2 nighttime missions. One is a raid on an offshore facility with your squadron members. The other is a solo attack on air defences across a cold mountain range. I bet by playing each mission's music you can guess which track is assigned to which mission. Did you get it right? The first reference for the game's music was Nier Autonoma. According to a very informative pair of videos Jose Pavli, the producer of the game's music, released on YouTube. These videos reveal a lot of things about the soundtrack, so I'll link them in the description. In summary, the soundtrack is built of different leitmotifs and staccatos, representing different themes and groups. Certain instruments also represent different ideas, like the element accordion being tied to Mongolian throat singing. The most recurring leitmotif is this one. It plays in different forms throughout the game, such as Crimson Squadron's theme having some elements of it. It's an extremely varied soundtrack to fit the tone of the various missions. I'll return to the music during the story segment, but you get the idea of fighting a playful merc with this soundtrack. And a serious pair of Federation elites with this one. It's excellent work. Moving on though. The story of Project Wingman begins with us hunting Somali pirates off the coast of Alabama. Sicario, our mercenary group, is implied to be a less notable outfit and is active along the periphery, which is just a frontier of poorer North American nations. The impression we get is that Sicario is kinda down on its luck. They can't even afford a license for the briefing software. This was very relatable for me, as at the time of recording I had Activate Windows stuck on my screen. It's here we're introduced to our 3 main mercenaries. Monarch is us, the player. He has little identifiable personality and primarily serves as a blank slate for the player to project themselves on. His muteness is canonically explained as him being locked in. The symbol of him doubles up both as a crown and as a monarch butterfly, the nuance of which is often lost on those we come into contact with. Diplomat and Comic are our squadron members. They're both clearly experienced and old as far as people in a profession like this are concerned. Doxing is apparently a very serious threat for mercs in this universe, as bounty hunters will track them down, hence why they have to stick to call signs and never real names. So it always makes me laugh when these two constantly relay their entire life story over open comms.
Hey Dad, you haven't very much care.
We managed to get 100 PS5!
I wonder if that'll come back to harm them. There's also the AWACS Galaxy. He's our glorified radio jockey for the course of the game, and as is typical for the genre, gives out callouts during gameplay. I briefly spoke to his VA during a livestream, and within 5 minutes he was saying he would find me and beat me up. Ever since, I have been training in effective home defense techniques and guerrilla warfare, using an army of local scavs to do my bidding, in preparation for our inevitable duel. We also meet an optional character, Prez. Prez is basically a first for the genre, a WSO who's an actual separate character from the player. Ace Combat was always weird in this regard, as despite there being clearly a second human in the player's aircraft, they're never brought up. If Chopper dies in AC-5 in a twin-seater, his Wizzo is consigned to the dustbin of history, and only Chopper's death is mentioned. Prez, on the other hand, has various interactions with the cast and acts like a person in these situations would. The combat dialogue is also much less composed than Galaxy's, probably because of the constant risk of death. I like Prez's character for reasons dissimilar to the majority of the fanbase, mainly because the dialogue is pretty funny.
Eat my ass, Galaxy.
Kaiser is the leader of our mercenary corps. He's a glory hound, hence his interest in getting a role in the massive war brewing in Cascadia. Speaking of which, the motivations for the Cascadian War of Independence are never fully explored. Our CIF rep tells us it's because the Federation is too expansionist and Cascadia cannot support its imperialism. But with the massive Cordian reserves, the magic power element of this universe, in Cascadia, and the rebels' strange behaviour in the latter half, things feel off. The real motivations of the rebels are going to be shown in the art book, but good luck getting that anytime soon. But once we're fighting for the rebels, things pick up. Project Wingman does a much better job than Ace Combat at strategically justifying each mission's purpose. Early on it's covering retreats and evacuations, then it shifts to targeting infrastructure, then conquest in the last third of the game. Starting at mission 7, the game dedicates 3 missions to specific characters. Comic, then Diplomat, then a solo mission. The solo run can be done alone, but the achievement icon for beating this mission has Prez's emblem, so we can assume it's dedicated to her. Given the game has established its characters and setting now, you'd assume it uses these missions to better develop its core cast. But it doesn't really. We learn almost nothing about Comic in Mission 7, other than a random line about fishing.
Even when I'm a mercenary, I still end up fishing.
Diplomat seems to be struggling to keep up a little in Mission 8. Mission 9 does go away towards providing some development. Prez apparently has trouble breaking into Hitman's social circle, and Comic considers fragging Dip like a Vietnam deployed American would do if their lieutenant did something slightly annoying. More can be gleaned from the records section in-game, which at least fleshes out the characters a little. Comic, being the more serious of the two, is likely due to her birth in a poorer American nation, unlike Dip being the son of a senator. Regardless of missed opportunities to develop characters, this is still leagues ahead of AC7, which had you switch between 3 squadrons of mostly forgettable characters. As for the supporting characters, Captain Woodward steals the show.
This is Captain Woodward, commander of this proud vessel, and we graciously accept your help.
For a Coast Guard sailor who's just hijacked a battleship, you'd think he'd be more out of his depth, but he's very fun. The game gets closer to the typical peak of an Ace Combat game with Mission 11. You're a feared and renowned fighter pilot tearing through multiple air forces in a massive furball. It's obviously accompanied by an absolute banger in the soundtrack. At the end, we duel with the peacekeeping squadron Crimson. They're set up as the main antagonists in Mission 6, where we're told to flee from them. However, we are able to engage and down one of them, which brings out some unique dialogue. It's a step ahead of Ace Combat, which normally makes its boss squadrons invincible when the plot demands it. Another way it beats out Ace Combat is how Monarch is treated at the start of the game. I get that when AC has you start as a rookie, it's ludo-narrative harmony, since it's also the player's first time playing. But it doesn't make sense for the player to shoot down 20 aircraft and our squadron members still to be like, whoa, easy there, he's still got a long way to go. A lot of my complaints are AC7 specific, to be fair. My goat could never. Project Wingman treats you as a well-respected merc from the get-go, so it feels more natural to clear out an entire airbase on Mission 3. Returning to Crimson, the only actual character in that squadron is the lead, Crimson 1. His ideology is hard to define outside of his loyalty to the Federation. I'd argue he simply wants a unified world state under the Federation, probably because they treat him like the world's best ace. To lose the Federation would be to lose his status, and I think that's his motivation. It explains some of his dialogue anyway. Proceeding from Mission 11, there's a perceptible tone shift. Mission 12 shows that something isn't right with the Federation's technology, as we have to fight a French woman in a superplane. I broke the dialogue for this boss fight because it turns out if you aim a burst rocket pod well enough, you can wipe out an entire boss phase instantly. In Mission 13, it's clear our mercenary colleagues are starting to get envious of Sicario's glory. We're launching a second attack on Pearl Harbor to cripple the main Federation air fleet before it reaches Cascadia. Dip has to reason with the Slovakian defense forces to not interfere in a message that sounds oddly familiar.
This is a message representing the combat aircraft running airspace of the Kingdom of Slovakia to all concerned.
We are attacking the terrorist base at Westland's farm at this time. This attack is against Rhodesian dissidents and not against...
Open Season finally has the funny colour kick in. People say that the mission Consequence of Power is where things really start to go downhill, but I'd say this mission is at that point, for the music alone. The Federation troops start a massive forest fire to try and protect themselves, and that's clear foreshadowing for the next mission. Mission 15 is the most notorious. Starts off as a regular assault, though we can hear disagreements between Federation officers.
You're gonna have to kill me.
Then,
This is AWACS Galaxy to Alcon. I repeat, this is AWACS Galaxy to Alcon. Alcon.
this section's trick is letting you down cruise missiles, lulling you into a false sense of security. It also makes you feel responsibility if any impact. The music further adds to the tension. Regardless of how hard you try, there's too many. Hitman Team's plan now is to just evacuate, which leads to another fight over our home airbase with the Frenchwoman. The fellow mercs we've known since day one, Master Goose, have also turned on us. They had hinted at this in Valkyrie's call, hence why I think the tone shift happens before Consequence of Power. Frost, the Frenchwoman, is our main mercenary enemy in the game. She doxes Dip and Comic, leading to them questioning who ratted them out. Fortunately, Monarch Present Galaxy's privacy is secure because they used our sponsor for today's video, NordVPN. The motivations of mercenaries aren't fully explored in game, and it's through talking with Frost we get our own interrogation of these ideas. Frost is the raw idea of a mercenary, a fighter who simply goes wherever the most money is, even if that means fighting for an untrustworthy state like the Federation. She does also seem to be a fan of the mercenary world order though. Master Goose betrays us likely because they wanted more money, hence this quote. On the opposite side, Kaiser is purely interested in glory. Like most 13-year-old boys on TikTok melodic comment sections, the thought of launching huge operations and dying in battle is very appealing to him. Which is probably why he launched a near-suicidal attack on the Solana communications array in Mission 10.
I have seen things you pedorts wouldn't believe. Mobix on fire off the outskirts of Popasna. I've watched Polish mercenaries glow in the dark near the Bahamutsk River. All those moments will be lost in time, like
cocks in ass.
Diplomat and Comic are here simply because neither of them had any other option, and now that they're here, they don't see a way out. Ironically, the only optional character, with far less dialogue than anyone else, has the most compelling motivation. Prez does it for her family, back in the Federation core. This is a single sentence in the records, but if developed further, would have been extremely compelling. Someone who's motivated to commit questionable actions to protect their family is a very well used trope by now, but it could have tied in with another system. In most missions there are targets highlighted in white rather than the usual green. On closer inspection there are things like lighthouses, unarmed firefighting aircraft and trucks evacuating the wounded. Destroying them still grants you points to be used when buying new aircraft, and they're basically defenseless. Ace Combat Zero had a similar system where, depending on the amount of non-hostile targets you took out, you'd be ranked as a knight, soldier, or mercenary. If you're too young to remember that, just think about the honour system from the funny Horseman game.
Oh, I got lumbago. It's very serious.
The clever part of this system was that it didn't change the ending, as morally, none of the positions are ideal. To be a knight is to see your warpath as noble, despite the consequences. To be a soldier is to fight with no clear goal, just destroying things when convenient. And to be a mercenary shows you have no values, other than money. What the system did change was dialogue and the enemy A squadrons you fought. Now this is obviously a big ask to include all that extra content in a much smaller title. But the included mercenary targets make absolutely zero difference in the game. They're just 3 points. It's a shame because, given the different characters' alignments, they could have commented if you chose to spare or destroy these targets.
Certainly not him.
This person doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
I'd have to guess this was cut content. Not that I blame the devs for abandoning this difficult task, but I wonder why they're still in the game. After killing the French woman, the only cutscene in the game plays. Our current plan was to flee the country, though made much harder by the recent doxing. Stardust, our Cascadian liaison, offers us a deal to get us to stay. As a plot point, the deal is kinda frustrating as it's never revealed what the deal actually is. It's going to offer us security, but also huge amounts of power, as Prez reveals in the next mission. So it can't just be a fresh set of passports. If it was power as in turning Cascadia into a mercenary haven, then Kaiser wouldn't be so apprehensive. I think it has to be some kind of ancient weapon, maybe a superplane or ballistic missile submarine. But we can't know for sure. I don't like how a huge part of the character motivations in the last third hinge on something that's never revealed. But if this is expanded in the future or in a potential sequel, I don't mind. The next few missions resume from where we were, about to defeat the Federation despite the apocalyptic conditions. Note that from Mission 11 onwards there isn't a single piece of the soundtrack in the game that isn't a banger. Mission 17 puts a funny spin on the typical Ace Combat superweapon fight. Instead of unstoppable forces capable of turning the tide of the war, the massive land battleships the Federation roll out are sitting ducks and their crew know it. In return, we come back to the destroyed city of Prospero, which was ground zero for the accordion-armed cruise missiles. Our final battle with Crimson Squadron takes place here. Crimson 1 is in complete denial that the Federation did this, and blames it entirely on us. Diplomat responds with what I've wanted to say to so many villains in this genre. Crimson dies and we move on. During the destruction of the Federation fleet in Mission 19, Prez mentions to Dip that there's no way people like themselves can move on after this. Whatever the deal is, it seems the whole group is committed to it by now. They aren't even going by TAC names anymore. The final mission is the liberation of Presidia. The briefing says we can choose which operations area to proceed to at which time, similar to Ace Combat 7's Farbanti. In the actual game though, it's a linear mission, so I have to assume it's cut content. Despite this, it's still an extremely fun time. And it is literally called Operation Manifest Destiny.
Do not count days. Do not count miles. Count only the number of friends you have killed.
We push on through the city until a ceasefire is suddenly declared. Having to suddenly stop fighting is a pretty funny conclusion to a game where our primary interaction with the world has been killing. But despite all the hardships and what may come soon, we did it.
We did it! We did it! I can't believe it! We resisted the Federation!
Ocean man, take me by the hand, lead me to the land that you understand. Ocean man, the voyage to the corner
Yeah, no, that isn't a fitting conclusion. I like this ending. Ace Combat always made a point about how war and bloodshed is bad. Pixie even had a very valid quote about this.
You think you can stop bloodshed by shedding more blood? Flying with all those ideals swimming around in your head is gonna get you killed.
Yet every game ends in you saving millions of lives purely by destroying things. Project Wingman lets you buy into the same power fantasy, yet shows you the realistic endpoint of it. Escalating firepower only ends in further escalation and death. The actual fight with Crimson is more resemblance of a bullet hell game. Crimson can spam hundreds of missiles, railgun shots and force fields, so it's funny how he says,
Just me and you, whoever wins is the best pilot.
yeah, sure bro. His actual dialogue in this mission isn't all that relevant. He's desperately trying to blame us for what he chose to do, as a result of losing his honour and his country. The music in this fight is dramatic and mournful. You've already lost, so all you can do now is survive. If you brought Prez along for this mission, she'll pass out after phase 1. Somehow we retain full functionality of the aircraft, so I can only assume she was only there for emotional support. I do like how the dialogue at the start of phase 2 actually works whether she's there or not. At the end of the fight, our threat warning system has an error, and displays Monarch as the threat. We're the world's best ace now, but it's a hollow victory. On the default ending, the world has saved nothing for us, and we aimlessly fly off. On the mercenary difficulty ending, things play out the same, but our squad mates are revealed to be alive. Looks like the deal is still on the table. Overall, I do like the plot of Project Wingman, and while it could have been better developed in some areas, I still think it has a lot of thematic value thanks to its final mission. That isn't quite all of the game though. There's the roguelite mode, Conquest. It's fun for a while. The main issue I have with it is that there aren't any ground attack based missions. Conquest literally gives you nukes, yet you don't have any targets to use them on. Building an air fleet is fun though, so if a future update increases the mission variety I might put more hours into it. Mercenary difficulty is essentially New Game Plus. It's unlocked after beating the game once and all your aircraft carry over. Missiles and gunfire are now significantly harder to avoid and enemies are more manoeuvrable. But the main draw of it is the fact that endgame enemies appear throughout the game now. Oh look, the cargo ships fire burst missiles now. Definitely a good way to get an extra play throughout the game. The game also got a DLC, Frontline 59. It's very interesting in concept, having us play as a Federation reservist, the natural opposite of a mercenary veteran. The new cast is cool, it delves deeper into the setting, there's a tunnel run, and of course an insane soundtrack. It would have its own full section, but somehow it's a PS5 exclusive.
Konnichiwa Osuturaria-sama. It is me, Kenichiro Yoshida, CEO of Sony.
Oh yeah, Bonzo matey, it's me, RB Romani, lead developer of Project Wingman, cunt.
Sir, it has recently come to our attention that the PlayStation 5 has 0 games. We would like to enlist your help if you release an exclusive DLC on the No Games machine.
Nah, sorry mate, our core player base is on PC and Xbox, so we can't do that. You're gonna pay me how much? I could buy 3 bottles of EB Longneck with that one, cunt. Vegemite Craft Ice Snack 2.0. Deliciously different Vegemite experience.
Get that up, yeah.
So yeah, we can't play it. I have to hope it's a timed exclusive, as is the case with many new Sony titles. If you want more Project Wingman, there's plenty of mods available, some more balanced than others. I really want to see the art book when it comes out as well. It is an incredibly impressive game considering it was made by 3 people, and they all seem to be cooking things I'm very anxious to see released.
Well, you can tell everybody. Yeah, you can tell everybody.
Don't sweat it. We're about to break off and go west anyway, towards Cascadia.
Cascadia?
Hitman team, get on the clock.
Comic punching in.
Hitman 2, copy you clear, Galaxy.
Hitman 1, Monarch and Prez.
Here again, SWAT team on a midnight
Ingram gun. We parachute in, we parachute out. Death from above, we're screaming now. Risk is high, it's understood. We'll do or die. Stand gun in hand, where the gun is law. From a bomb land to Nicaragua.
This country's gone insane.
3 young men in a Russian truck with a little M10, send them running to the huts. A few young men, a few who dare to battle in hell. A mercenary.
Die, mercenary!
I don't watch reviews on games I'm interested in covering, but in hindsight I really wish I did. This guy Soroffel made a PW review 3 years ago, and some of our sections are almost word for word. Please, I am sorry, I didn't intend for this to happen. I have to hope I have enough funny Breaking Bad references to be different. He hasn't uploaded in a while, so I can assume he's dead, probably turned 26. I also forgot to cover the AOA limiter, it's just a thing that lets you do the thing. There's also modifiers, kinda like the Halo 2 skulls. Like Critical, anyone who beats Project Wingman on Mercenary difficulty with all modifiers on, I will give you 5 pence for it if you come to Manchester. That's the video. I was originally going to do Stalker 2 after this, but it got delayed, again. So we've got enough time to fit another game in, probably Regiments or Signalis. But there's always a chance it could be something else though. Thanks to Spino, Socks and Ptolemy for helping throughout, especially with the voice acting, as I couldn't get a Japanese man, so I had to get the next best thing. I also couldn't get an Australian, so I just hired a man who cloned his entire YouTube channel off an Australian. Thanks for watching.